So I'm Dolores Inés Casillas, a professor here at UCSB. Yvett Merino was a production manager also on the film Moana. How many of us saw Moana as well, right? And that same team brought us this film as well. And Yvette is also a proud UCSB alum and a first-generation college student, which means she was the first in her family to graduate from college. So very proud of her accomplishments. I also want to say that I'm a board member at Adelante, so thank you for any Adelante families that are out there that came today too. So when I told my youngest son what I was doing today, because I'm going to be late to his older brother's baseball game today, I said, I'm going to interview the producer from Encanto, and she's Latina. And his response, and I was surprised and a little dismayed, was, well, of course she is. It's a film about Latinos. But yet we know that for too long, movies, even animations about Latino families have always been written, produced, and starred by characters and people that were not Latino. So give us, Yvette, kind of this big picture importance of actually being a part of something like this.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited, and thank you for coming out and seeing the film. I snuck a peek, and it's always so fun to watch it with a full audience. So, but yes, you know, that comment, I giggled a little bit because it seems obvious, yeah. But not really so. You know, very often, you know, I talk a lot about like when I was young and seeing different films, I never saw characters that looked like me or my family that were on TV, and if they were represented, you know, they were people in the background doing, you know, the help or, you know, maybe the villains or the criminals in the programs. And when I started at Disney and we started making films, you know, I really noticed that there was not a lot of people of color and representation in the leadership and the storytelling team. And that has changed. I've been at Disney for a very long time, and thankfully that has changed over the years, but I'm grateful that your son had that reaction because that's how he sees the world. Like, of course that would happen, but the reality of it, it's really not, it seems obvious to me and to you and your son, but not so obvious a lot of times within the industry because the industry has been around for so long and it's very, very structured. So I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to be in the room and to really talk about it, and that the filmmaking team, our directors and all of our story team, they weren't coming in like, oh, you're the Latina coming in and checking things off. They were really curious, and it was so important to represent the Colombian culture in this film and make sure that we did it right. And I'm so grateful that the team that we had was really open to that and open to learning more rather than thinking that they knew how to do it. So
wonderful. And just for some of us out there, you're the producer of this film, the film that won an Oscar.
Yes.
So please tell me, yes, let's clap forever for that. Tell me, what does a producer do?
So that's a great question because the word producer is used in many different places. On our films in our studio, my job is really to partner with the directors who are the creative leads of the show. And I do everything from making sure that what's in their head is communicated out to the team. At one point on a film, we'll have about 400 artists working on the film in all different capacities. And their whole job is to get the director's vision, whatever they have in their head, up on the screen. And so my job is to help translate that, because sometimes directors, you know, need help translating kind of what's in their head, and really to help guide the story. A big part on Encanto was really overseeing our cultural trust, who came in and watched different versions of the film to make sure that we were representing the culture correctly. And then also, so really my big job is to partner with the directors to make sure the film gets done. I oversee the budget, all the scheduling, that kind of stuff. There's a whole amazing team that also helps me do that. And then also I work with the company at large with the marketing and the rollout, and we talk about how the film is being marketed and how it's playing and all that stuff.
Kind of la mera mera. the one in charge. Now, while you were making and producing this film, did you ever get a sense that it was going to be as big as it is? That kids would be singing "We Don't Talk About Bruno" in the car on repeat, and I think your families understand this, or choosing a Madrigal character for Halloween, or even your daughter who's here, who's in 2nd grade, wearing a sweatshirt with all 3 Madrigal sisters and like these beautiful different skin tones.
Yeah.
I mean, the aftermath and the success of it, did any of it kind of surprise you?
You know what? I think we always hope. We work on these films for so long. I was on Encanto for about 3.5 years. The directors were working on it for about 5 years. And we work in such a bubble, and we can't talk about it, outside of the studio. And we work every day. We work very long hours, but we, sometimes we get things and we're like, oh, I think this is really, people are going to like this or are going to enjoy it. And other times, we don't know. But really, we kind of put it together. We put the best film together, and we kind of just give it out, put it out in the world, and hope people react. And of course, Encanto, we made Encanto during the pandemic, so we made it all from home. And so we all made it watching it, I made it watching it on my 13-inch laptop screen. And the first time I had to go into a theater to see the trailer, I cried a little bit because it was just so big and so beautiful. And I was like, oh, look at what we're making. But then I was like, oh, I said, well, this is really beautiful. Like, it's better than on my little fingerprint-filled laptop screen. And, but you kind of put them out and you hope. And then it came out in the theaters, and then a month later it hit Disney Plus, and then that's when it really started. TikTok kind of got me through the pandemic. And so I was just scrolling through TikTok, and then all of a sudden I saw one thing. I was like, oh, that's funny, Encanto. And then I saw another one, and then it really just blew up.
So what do you do when you're walking around Target and then randomly you hear a song from Encanto?
I giggle. I do. It's to me, I think I'm grateful for my job, and I think that I'm so grateful that I'm able to do what I do. And when I'm walking anywhere, like in an elevator, and I hear some like weird instrumental version of it,
yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's cool. I remember, it always takes me back to even when We Don't Talk About Bruno was first created, and all of those stories of like, oh, well, we need this song, and it's about Bruno, but he's not in it. And we were sitting, again, because of the pandemic, everybody was home. We had these Friday night meetings with Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he would be like, oh, okay. And then he literally turned to his keyboard. He's like, something like this, dun, dun, dun. And we're like, okay. He goes, I'll be back. And within a week, we had the song.
Wow.
And we were like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's fun.
So Encanto was released during the pandemic at a time when we didn't return to big movie theaters. So many of us saw it from the comfort of our couch, where we could pause, go to the restroom, or pause, get another drink. It was actually very conducive, I think, to watching it with families. How do you think that sort of release that was at home on a couch in the comfort of our home, how do you think that affected like the impact of the movie?
We talked about it a lot even before it came out, while we were making it, and we didn't know what the future of the pandemic was and where it would be, and if the theaters would open. We were all a little like stressed and trying to like, what's going to happen. But we always talked about this film being a film to watch with families. And we always talked about, we hoped people would go to the theater or see it at their homes with their families, because it is a film, about family and about the struggles and the joys and the sisterly fights and all of that. And so we talked, there was always like the want, you always imagine how your audience is going to receive it, but we always thought like, oh, we would love for people to go see it with their families. And so I think, having it available over streaming really kind of help make that happen, because not everybody was ready to go back to the theaters, or even, people were visiting for the holidays. It came out right on Disney Plus on Christmas Eve, and so people were together for the holidays. And so they were together, and I would get random texts, oh, I watched this with my family. Oh, even when I went back to work, people were like, oh my gosh, I watched this with my grandmother or my mother, and it opened up an entire conversation. So it was really I don't know, gives me all the feels.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that one of my favorite reviews of the film was in The Atlantic, and it was comparing both Moana and Encanto. And it said that, quote, that it had taught America that, quote, all is not lost and the future is not set, unquote. And I thought this captured such a strong current within the film, how to acknowledge, learn, and better understand the present because of the past, and trying to make sense also of some conversations, some stories we have from immigrant families. And as you said, so many people opened up a conversation intergenerationally, and stories about immigration that are ugly, that we tend not to want to say out loud. And this was a huge theme among social media and digital media. Did you see any other examples of that?
Well, yeah, I think, one of our co-director and one of the writers, Charisse Castro-Smith, when she came onto the project, she wrote that scene of when Abuelo, when they were crossing and he kind of went up against the villains, and we, it set the tone and the theme of the film, and we played with it a lot. We put it in the front of the film. We're like, oh, it's too dark to start the film that way. We put it in the back of the film, and so we switched it around a lot. But really, that, the idea of, leaving a home, no matter what home you have, and having to start a new life, and you expect what you expect life to be doesn't always work out that way.
Right.
And you have to, but it leads you, you're on this journey and it leads you to where you want to be. And so we talked about that a lot in the story room, and how immigrant families have to leave everything that they have. A lot of times families leave their home because of different circumstances, and how they have to start a new life, and their expectations, and what reality is, and how you build from that. And the one thing I love about Encanto is just the way, Abuela held all that for so long inside, and it reminded me of my grandmothers who came to this country, and it reminded me of my parents and the stories that they have growing up that they didn't always talk about, because the history is with them, and they kind of share what they're ready to share. But because of that, because of my grandmothers and my grandparents, I'm here today, and I'm here and able to do what I can do, and I'm grateful for that, and I think of that every single day when I walk into the.
And I like that phrase that you used, is that our grandparents, sometimes they carry that, right? They carry that, and this was an opportunity to maybe unload a little bit of that, right, at the same time. I know that this movie was specifically about Colombianos, and not a depiction of someone like Dora, who purposely is more of a generic Latina. And if you've ever seen Dora the Explorer, one day she has a piñata, the other day she doesn't. So they kind of mixed a bunch of different little Latin American origin type of cultures. And it's also not Mexican specific, as we saw like in Miguel and Coco. But tell us a bit about the importance of highlighting a Latino ethnic group, Colombianos in the United States, given that Colombianos in the United States make up just 3% of our overall population.
Yes. Well, when Jared and Byron, the two directors, and Lin-Manuel, they all wanted to work together and create this musical. When they started, we were kind of looking all over different countries in South America, and really, the more that they did their research, the more they found that Colombia really is such a crossroads of all the different cultures. And so they started really diving into the history and research of Colombia, and they took a trip to Colombia, and they had an amazing time, and they didn't take me. But really, research is such a huge part of what we do at Disney Animation, and because we really want to create these worlds that are believable and these characters that are deep and rich. And so part of our process is really once we get our leadership on the team, we take them on a research trip. And we were all scheduled to go to Colombia so our animators can actually see people from the country in their world, and the lighters can go see how the light falls on the mountains. And there is so much research that happens. Unfortunately, our trip was scheduled for the end of March of 2020, so we had to cancel. We canceled our trip on a Monday, and then by Friday we were all working from home. And so we didn't actually get to go, but we quickly shifted once we realized the pandemic was not going to be 2 weeks that we had all hoped it would be. We quickly shifted and said, okay, well, since we couldn't go, how do we bring Colombia here? Again, one of the things that's so inspiring is that every single person on that crew worked so hard to represent the country as it is, as beautiful as it is. And one of the beauties it's so beautiful with the music and the biodiversity, but really the diversity within the people, right? And so we wanted to make sure that that our family looked as diverse as many Latino families are. And I even talked a lot in our story room. I was like, yeah, I have cousins who have red hair and blue eyes, Yeah. But nobody questions if they're Latino. Nobody questions. That's just how the family is. And so we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity with so many characters is to really make sure that we're representing all different kinds and like how families truly are. Afro-Colombian, red hair, dark hair, curly hair, straight hair. I mean, really, us Latinos are all different shades and colors. And, skin tone, again, was a very, very big conversation that we had over and over again, and making sure that as we were building these characters, that we knew exactly what the skin tone was for each character and how it lit and how the light was reflecting. And then we're fortunate to work at Disney Animation, because as it turns into product, we took that to all of our consumer product partners of like, no, the skin tone absolutely has to be correct. I've turned down, there were some products that we typically do on films. I was like, we can't do it. If you can't match the skin tones, we can't do it, because it's so important for people to see themselves on the screen.
Absolutely. I love that the quote-unquote perfect daughter isn't a light-skinned, what we would usually associate with what is kind of perfect, for instance. And a lot of people did remark very positively about the Afro-Latino character representation, and hailed it quite positively. And a lot of people also talked about the accents, right? Like listening to this different type of accents by different characters throughout. What was the decision-making kind of behind that too?
Yeah. I keep saying we talk a lot at work, but we did. We wanted to make sure that the accents were correct, and we made the choice of Abuela having the stronger accent, and then it faded a bit as it went down through generations, which happens a lot. And then we wanted, again, all over Latin America, there's many different dialects and accents, and a lot of people, when we started saying that we were going to focus in Colombia, they were like, okay, can you make sure the Spanish accent is a Colombian accent? Because when it's translated, a lot of times it's doing like what they call a neutral accent, which I think is Mexican, but I'm not sure. But so we talked a lot about it. Then we had a dialect coach come in and listen to every single thing that was recorded and really give notes. And then we brought the actors back and says, oh, can you say it this and put the accent here, because in Colombia it would be this. So we really paid a lot of attention to it. Again, all about building those worlds that we don't, as people are watching the film, we don't want them to be distracted of like, oh, that doesn't sound right. So we really just want to build this world where people can immerse themselves in the story.
Even the fact that the film's title is in Spanish, I think is important, right? That in and of itself, it's something that we're forced to repeat and say out loud if we seek to. Yes.
That's true. I mean, we always start with the title very early on, and many times, because the film is around for so long, it changes throughout, but Encanto was always
interesting.
There and consistent.
That's wonderful. So this is Disney's first Latino musical. Where were you when you got the call that you were nominated for an Oscar?
So the nominations come out at 5 a.m. in LA time. And so, of course, I woke up and we were on this group text with the other filmmakers, and we're like, oh, it's coming up, and and our composer, Jermaine Franco, who wrote an amazing score, was also nominated. So we're like, oh, yay, Jermaine. And then Lin-Manuel, the song Dos Oruguitas was, oh, yay. And then it came up, and we all just kind of screamed. My kids were asleep. And then we screamed, and we were all texting back and forth. And then I had to get them ready for school. So it lasted for about 10 minutes. But it was very, very exciting, and I was very grateful.
And then you attended the Oscars.
I did.
And tell me, what color was your dress?
I wore a black, it was a two-tone dress with a cream off-white top and a black skirt, and it was a gown, and it was with high heels and everything. And when they called our names, I was so excited, and the guys I was with, the two directors and my other producer, they were so kind. I was just like, just walk me down the aisle, but they were so kind, and we were all in the moment. They said, you go first, and so they let me go first. So the whole time I was walking down, I was like, don't trip, don't trip, don't trip. Your shoes are really high, don't trip here. So
that's great. I know that I proudly display my kids' trophies and certificates at home. It's a practice that I learned from my own mom, right, who placed every accomplishment on display. A reminder, I believe, for immigrant families that individual accomplishments are always really familial, family-oriented community accomplishments. So tell me, where is your Oscar, and do you let your mom borrow it from time to time?
My Oscar is in the office. I have a little office at home, and so right now it's sitting on the shelves there. But I did let my mom borrow it. The funny thing is that we were in the middle of moving, and so we were having open houses in our house, and I was like, well, I can't have an Oscar in the house. That's kind of weird when people come through. So I took it and I went to my mom's house, and I said, I just need you to have it here for a while we sell the house. Okay. And then 2 months later, I went back and got it. I was like, what'd you do with it? She's like, well, I said, did you take it out? Well, I put it on the table. I was like, okay. I said, did you she says, well, my friend Penny came over, and I had to show her. And so she had fun with it.
It's been on tour.
It's been on tour.
That's wonderful. Can we give her another big round of applause, please, thanking her? So let's do some questions, if that's okay.
Hi, my name is Mona. Welcome back to UCSB. Thank you for this beautiful film. While the film was going, I would cry every time I watch Encanto, of course. But my friend was joking to me at the end and saying, wow, Disney's really come a long way going from Jafar to Family Expectations being the villain. I've been reflecting a lot about all the different ways that Encanto distinguishes itself, that there's no real romantic story at the center driving the plot. Just the fact that it's about family, really, through and through. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, from your perspective, what has changed structurally in these major studios like Disney that's allowed for these kinds of really different storytelling?
Good question.
What a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think there's been a lot that changed. I've been at Disney for 26 years, so I've kind of seen a lot, the wave of changes. And I worked in a different capacity very early on in my career, and then I got involved in production. And one of the things, again, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, of being the only person of color in the room, and being sometimes and very often being the only woman in the room. But one of the things as films go on, and obviously our world is changing, but we became aware of how our stories are viewed and seen and kind of accepted into the world, and we want to tell the world that reflects the world that we live in. And Jennifer Lee is our Chief Creative Officer, and she truly leads under the guidance of these films need need to reflect the world and uplift the culture that we're focusing on. Or same with Moana. One of the things that we did really heavily on Moana was really create this, and it was the first time done in our studio ever, our Oceanic Story Trust, where they would see the process of animation. We look at the whole film and storyboards many, many times before it actually is finished. And so we would share that with our cultural consultants and make sure that we are not only not offending is like the baseline bar. I don't even like to use that, but the fact that we are uplifting and representing this culture that that people live in, and the same with many of our films, Raya and the Last Dragon, and even Encanto. We had our Colombian Cultural Trust where they would see the film and they would be like, well, it feels a little bit, our designers would work with them, and that feels a little bit more Mexican than Colombian, and so we should lean a little bit more this way. But I really think that people are open to it. And it's talked about a lot more. So I think early on, it was really just story, and there was not a lot of diverse voices in the room, and not only ethnic diversity, but gender and all different kinds of diversity. And so now we are so open, we seek it out and making sure that our rooms are diverse, and we have people from various backgrounds, from very experienced artists to very new artists. So we are making sure that we hear voices from everywhere.
It sounds also like diversity is being handled as a value. And I think the danger sometimes is that media industries will handle it as a priority, but priorities shift.
Correct.
So then sometimes you no longer see that of some significance, rather than seeing it as a value to the foundation of media industries.
It is really one of the values that we have. Thank you for making that distinction, because and what inspires me when I walk into our studio is that we share that value across, no matter what department you're in and no matter how you're touching the film. We all share that value of making sure that we are properly representing the culture.
Hi, Yvett Merino. Thank you for visiting our campus. It was a very lovely film, and I enjoyed it many times at home, and this is my first time enjoying it in the theater. I want to ask, so we know where Encanto is, but when is Encanto? And because it has this very timeless feel, but I'm wondering if there's a specific time period that is also inspired in the film.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for saying it's timeless, because we always try to build these films. But the story of Encanto, of when it takes place, is Abuela Alma and Abuelo Pedro, they left their homes in the early 1900s. So this is 50 years later. So it actually takes place in the mid, around 1950-ish. But because they've been cut off from the world, they don't have running electricity. We don't have all of the technical advances that happen in the world around that time.
They have magic.
They have magic, so it's okay. But that's why, it takes place, like the actual year somewhere in the mid-1900s, but because they've been cut off from the world of the early 1900s, that's kind of how we set the fashion and the design of all the buildings.
The person who created the production side of the school came from Disney originally, created an animation course that is still going today into its 40-something year. The students in the class do, their final project is only 5 to 7 seconds of hand-drawn animation. They learn everything from, throughout the history of animation, so we kind of have a traditional approach to it. They go from Gertie the dinosaur all the way through Iworks and understanding how the Disney relationship with Iworks worked. We've just been through some of these in recent lectures, and it's been very fun to see. And one of the things that is very fun as a TA for the course, her name is in the credits here. She TA'd in this room years ago for our animation course, and it's wonderful to have 2 alumni involved at both levels, from the top to the bottom. And I guess my question for you would be, what might you say to students who want to get into the industry?
I think one of the things for people who want to get into animation or into film is, there's the practical things of, go get an internship and really try, we all talk about networking, and believe me, even to this day, it's not like my favorite word to say, but really I always try to approach it of getting to know different people and trying to connect with different people of like, oh, well, I'm just interested and curious about what they do and kind of what their career path is. So try to find people who are, somewhat in the industry or in the field that you want to work in, and really just ask, what their path was. People like to talk about themselves, so it's fine. I always ask them, and then I don't have to say much. But, and one of the things that I always tell young students is, and a lot of times I talk to students who are like, this is what I want to be and this is what I want to do. And that's great if you have that. When I came here, I was 18, I had met my girlfriend, I met one of my friends here day one, and she's like, I want to be a teacher. And I was like, oh, that's great. And to this day, she's teaching. All these years later, she's teaching. So great. I did not have that. I was like, oh, I'm going to find out here. Oh, I'm going to do this. And like I said, I was a sociology major, and I was going to do social work, then I was going to teach, and then I was, and so I kind of bumped my way around it. Even when I started at Disney, I was a temp. I didn't, know what I wanted to do. I thought it'd be fun to work at Disney. After I realized I didn't want to do social work, I was like, well, let me just go temp around in the entertainment industry. And I was fortunate enough to get a long-term temp job at Disney, and the guy didn't hire me, which, whatever, but I sat next to the recruiters and I got to know them, and they got me another job there. So that's why I started Disney Animation. And so if you know what you want to do, bless you, that's great. If you don't, it's okay, but also be open to where the road takes you and to where life takes you, because I never in a million years, did I ever think that I would end up producing films at Disney Animation. And, I didn't even know these jobs existed, so to be honest. So for students that are trying to break in, I think it's great. I tell a lot of students who are still in film school, find out what you like to do. There's a lot of student projects. Oh my gosh, I know. When you say this, seconds of animation, and because animation takes so long, especially hand-drawn animation, and really kind of going through. So bless on the students, because that's a lot of work. But find out, if you are interested in film, and get involved with the film clubs and productions, and find out what you want to do, and play a role as a PA, or play a role as, hey, I'm going to be a producer on your project, or I'm going to help you produce this, or whatever. And you find out kind of where you fit within there. People want I want to be this, and that's all I want to be. But there's so many jobs within, and just in animation alone, there are so many jobs. We have lawyers that work with us. We have marketers. We have HR. We have all different. I don't draw. I would give anything to be able to draw. I'm not great at it. I could do a little happy face and a stick person. So, there's the practical advice: get internships and network and do all that stuff. But also just, kind of be open to where life takes you, and opportunities that come up, and say yes to them and go. And it may lead you. It may not be exactly what you want, but it may lead you to some place you never expected.
First of all, thank you so much for this amazing film. I was thinking about what you said about using, holding diversity as a value, and all kinds of diversity, like gender or ethnicity and everything. And I was wondering, Disney, which has historically been very shady with the queer community, I was wondering if we could get more conspicuous queer representation, because Raya, you were on Raya and the Last Dragon, and Raya and Namari are queer-coded, but the whole Luca thing came out with the creator being like, it's not queer, and Disney's only queer when it wants to capitalize on Pride Month with rainbow Mickey Mouse ears. So I was wondering where you see this going.
I think it's important, and really going back to what we talked about earlier, is that it is important, and I talk to a lot of filmmakers within the studio, and it's important that we represent the world that we live in. And we have all different kinds of people in the world, and we have queer people, we have straight people, and we have Colombian, and we have Afro-Latino, we have all different kinds, and so I think our films need to reflect that. And I know that there are, a lot of filmmakers within our studio, if not all of them, feel that way, and it is a value that we have and that we live by. So thank you.
Well, hopefully this is an opportunity also to have her go back and say, someone asked me a question about queer representation. So these are, productive moments for sure. Great. Well, I'm sure she would love to sign some posters for people. So thank you again so much for coming and supporting the Pollock Theater as well.
Thank you.